Good morning, everybody. How's it going today?
Wonderful.
Woo, yeah. My name is Ryan Battleson, and I'm a fish biologist. That's what I get to do for work. I work with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I get one of the coolest jobs, I think, in the world. I get to interact with salmon and steelhead and our native fish species of the Rogue and bring that to you, and bring that. I work with fishing groups, I work with local schools, I work with Rotary clubs, and we try and bring citizen engagement into fisheries management and natural resource management. And so today I'm going to be talking to you guys about salmon biology with the Salmon Watch program. So what's your name, young man?
Jonathan.
Jonathan. What does your name mean? Do you know what your name means?
I don't know.
No? You young lady.
My real name is Catherine. I think it has something to do with being regal or something.
Regal, Catherine, Regal. So, Francis, what are you? I think your name's Francis.
That's me. I got my name tag on.
What does Francis mean?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure? So my name is Ryan, and it means little king. And the funny thing is, we're actually going to be talking about a species in the Rogue today, and this species, hopefully, we're going to be very lucky and see them. They are the king salmon, so also known as Chinook salmon. Scientists have different names for, there's common names: Chinook salmon, king salmon, blackmouth salmon. There's so many names for these, but in science, we try and have specific names for specific species. And so I'm going to throw a big one at you right now. But does anybody know the scientific name for the Chinook salmon? There's a lot of meaning in it. No? Okay. So, you ready with me? Oncorhynchus shawisha. What the heck? So, Oncorhynchus is derived from Latin, and it's essentially onco is the Greek or Latin word for nose, and rhynchus is hooked. So the hooked nose. And Chinook salmon, Oncorhynchus shawisha, the shawisha is actually a nod to the native peoples of the Pacific Northwest. That's the common name for Chinook salmon, shawisha. There are a few species of Pacific salmon, actually five species of Pacific salmon. We're very lucky in the Rogue. We have two of them that they call the Rogue home. And there's another species that is in the same family, or the same species as Chinook salmon. So we have our Chinook salmon right here, our coho salmon, and where's our steelhead? Our steelhead. So they're all in the Oncorhynchus genus. They have different names: Oncorhynchus kisuj, Oncorhynchus mykiss, Oncorhynchus shawisha. All of our Pacific salmon and a lot of the fish that the Rogue has in it, we have 14 native species. Most of them have a life history or variety to them that they've evolved with, and it's very special to areas that have fresh water and the ocean near them. And that term is called anadromous. And that's probably the biggest word that I'm going to be asking you guys to remember today. Anadromy or anadromous. So Pacific salmon are anadromous fish. Does anybody, I kind of gave you a little hint. We have the ocean and freshwater. So the ocean and freshwater, that to be an anadromous fish means part of your life cycle, when you're a baby and when you're coming back to spawn, you're usually in fresh water. And then that is where you grow up. And as you're heading out to middle school or you're becoming a teenager, you're heading out to the Pacific Ocean. And why would we go to the Pacific Ocean? Does anybody know? There's more food out there, exactly. The Pacific Ocean, believe it or not, is one heck of a buffet. Does anybody like buffets here? Yeah. We don't really see buffets anymore with COVID, but back a few years ago, there used to be a place called a buffet you could go to, and there'd be all these awesome foods. You could try it all, and that's really how anadromy has evolved. Is there's more energy and more food in the Pacific Ocean, and so over millennia, these animals have evolved to take advantage of that, and they leave fresh water and go to the ocean to get more energy. So we are starting to get towards, everybody feel a little change in the air? Yeah, it's kind of starting to get a little cooler. Having shorter days. Water temperatures in our local river is going down. And what is happening right now is we have this amazing thing that's been happening for millennia. The native peoples called it time immemorial. Our salmon are coming back. They're coming back home, coming back to spawn. And so right now in the fall, this is where we're at. And as we start seeing some fall rains and winter rains, we're going to see our anadromous species returning home to spawn. So it first starts with what we're all here today, and that's our Chinook salmon. We're really lucky in the Rogue River. We actually have 2 varieties of Chinook salmon. And for you, those of you that are going to be coming to Salmon Watch field trips in September, you are going to be seeing spring Chinook salmon spawning. Spring Chinook, we're in the fall, right? What the heck? So we have a spring run and a fall run. That can be a little confusing, but spring run, that's just when they enter freshwater. So they come out of the ocean in the springtime, and these little fish come in and they swim all the way up the Rogue River, 156 miles if we're sitting here at McGregor Park right now. They swim up and they have to hold in the river all summer. They're not eating when they're here in the summer. Can you imagine not eating for like 4 months? What would help you survive the summer, you think, if you're coming into freshwater and you didn't have to eat for 4 months? Anybody? Remember, you just went to the buffet, right?
Eating a lot before.
Eating a lot before, yeah. You're coming in and you're fat and you're chubby, and you have all this awesome fat in you, and that is what helps you. That's how you've adapted to be able to handle to live in freshwater or to hang out in freshwater for 4 or 5 months before you spawn. So spring Chinook coming in the spring, they spawn in September. Our fall Chinook, they start coming in August, and they will come all the way up in through October, and they'll be spawning in October. So spring Chinook spawn in September, fall Chinook spawn in October. Behind those guys, the next species in the Rogue is our coho salmon, and that's what we're looking at here. So they all have the same kind of life history. They come up in the fall, they swim up river, they go tremendous migration to make it up here to their native waters. And that's what we're gonna go and witness. It's a really cool thing, and you guys are very lucky to be able to live in a watershed, a place where these fish live and come back. You know, what if we didn't have salmon, or sometimes we don't have salmon coming back, or we have habitat that might not support them. You guys live in their habitat as well, and so if you're not having good salmon runs, that can kind of be an indication that maybe your watershed is not healthy, or maybe the habitat in there is not as good as it could be. And we're going to learn a lot about habitat and requirements for salmon and steelhead and our native species as we go through Salmon Watch. You guys are going to learn that in your riparian module and your macroinvertebrates and water quality, what all we need. But really, we need cold, clean water, and that cold, clean water supports fish species. It supports the little bugs that hang out, the macroinvertebrates that hang out in the gravel. It builds this amazing ecosystem and food chain for baby fish. We're going to check all that out. So there's a cool little thing. You guys have senses, right? What's some senses? Touch, exactly.
Smell.
Salmon have a lateral line that helps them feel their environment. Taste, exactly. Smell. So smell is a huge sense that salmon and anadromous fish utilize. They have a tremendous sense of smell. They can smell where they grew up when they're out in the ocean. But when you're out in the ocean, that gets diluted a little bit also. There's another sense that they have that we really don't have. And there's more and more evidence of this. In science these days, we're learning that salmon actually have like an internal magnetic compass that's embedded essentially in their brain and their makeup. And when they go out to the ocean, they can sense. Long ago, we've had volcanoes and plates and all this kind of stuff happening in the bottom of the ocean. Well, the Earth has magnetism. It has a magnetic pole. We have a North Pole and a South Pole. And so they can tell where they are. They can orient themselves out in the Pacific Ocean. And that's one of the senses that they use to get back to where they respond. And then as they get closer, that smell starts taking over, and they can smell their home water. And then they're heading up there. So we're going to migrate. We just came from the ocean, and we're heading up. Where does the Rogue meet the ocean as we start walking?
Gold Beach.
Gold Beach. Have you been to Gold Beach?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a long ways from here. We had to drive a long time
Oh
to
yeah.
get there.
What are you encountering when you're in Gold Beach? When you're coming into the ocean, you got into the river. You got waves, and are there maybe animals that might be wanting to eat you? Seals, sea lions. Yep.
Bears.
There's fishermen. There's a lot of things moving against you and trying to eat you because you're a fish. We're about to Agnes. We're a little past it. Oh man, we're going through the Rogue Canyon. It's kind of warm. I'm gonna find a small, nice cold stream to hang out for a while. I'm just gonna hang out here right now. It's nice in the shade, it's cold. Get this nice little mountain stream coming down, and it's helping me because it's warm. It's a long trip for me to make it up the Rogue River, and I just need a break. So usually I'll hang out in the evenings and the mornings when you can see me hanging out by these little creeks. I don't want to be swimming in the middle of the day, but oh, sun's going down. It's evening time. Time to get moving again. Let's go. Swimming. There's a hole. Over there. What the heck is that? There's like a giant block right here, and it has just slowed down my migration. So how old are you guys? How old are you? Oh, you're 12? 12? Can any of you you probably weren't even born when a barrier to migration on the Rogue River actually used to be here. And this is like Back to the Future, 2007, 2008, and 2010. If I was a salmon moving up the Rogue River from pretty much the early 1900s, I would have been encountering, pretend this is a wall, I'd have been encountering a wall. So what would be a wall going across a river called?
A dam.
A dam, exactly. And so that dam is no longer here. Those three dams are no longer here. Savage Rapids, Gold Hill Dam, and Gold Ray Dam are no longer here on the Rogue. And that is a really good thing, because what that has helped is during our migration, as we're swimming upriver, we don't have to sit here and figure out, how can I get around my dam? How can I get around this big wall? And so, you know, since 2010, the Rogue has been free flowing for 157 miles. And that is a huge accomplishment to the people that have come before you guys and the people that wanted you to see salmon persist into the future. That's a really good thing. So take home message here is dams and big walls in the middle of your migration can really slow you down, can beat you up, and it can ultimately, you might get preyed upon down there. It might beat you up so bad that when you finally make it up, have enough energy to get up to your spawning grounds, you might not have enough energy and be beat up and you can't spawn as good, and essentially pass your genes and your contribution on to the next generation. So we don't have that anymore to deal with. We're swimming.
Swimming. And Finding Dory. Just keep swimming.
We have a school of us. You got 3 there. We're moving in little pods. What's a pod of fish called? A group of fish.
A school.
A school, exactly. We're schooling.
Hey Ryan, is Savage Rapids the only dam that impacted the passage to Bear Creek?
No. There was a number of dams on Bear Creek. Most notably would have been, well, Savage Rapids was the main stem dam in the Rogue. And that stood from essentially, I think, 1903, 1901, 1902. And it was taken out in 2007. So almost, definitely over a century.
I should have brought the pieces of the dam I have.
Yeah. But there's a lot of, so one of the main stem dams in Bear Creek actually was the Jackson Street Dam. And that was, a lot of people don't think or know about the Jackson Street Dam. That was actually taken down in 1998, 1997.
2001.
2001, is that when it finally happened?
And
But yeah, that was, you know, we've actually, there's countless little feral dams in the Rogue. We just crossed over Lazy Creek. This is Lazy Creek here. And probably about 7 years ago, there was actually a feral dam on Lazy Creek. And it was overgrown with blackberries. Really no history of why that dam existed there. There's a lot of little tiny dams like this in the Rogue Basin, and we're dealing with migratory fish, anadromous fish, so they're moving constantly. The momentum for these dams being removed, every year we're removing stuff. There's a lot of local groups that are doing this, the watershed councils. They receive public dollars to help them remove these barriers. ODFW Freshwater Trust is a group, or they do a lot of restoration removal or restoration projects. But yeah, there's just a tremendous amount of momentum for restoration in the road, just making habitat better.
So you want to mention the fish, the ladder that's upstream?
Yeah. So this is salmon don't really use Lazy Creek, but we've actually had in a good water year. Say we get an early October rain, we do get reports. Folks will be walking along Lazy Creek or Larson Creek. These are local streams of Bear Creek. We've had 25, 30 pound Chinook salmon, 2 miles up in the Medford. It starts down here in Bear Creek. That's the spawn pools. And it flows up here about another quarter mile, and then there is a barrier. It's a road culvert. It's actually over by the BMX Park. There is it's not the greatest passage, but there actually has been a little bit of improvements of that. Some local citizens took it upon themselves, it appears, to have improved fish passage. I would not advocate that anybody just goes to town and starts doing that on their own. I work with ODFW, and we have criteria that helps fish be able to pass structures, and there's certain jump heights that we look for and velocities. But anyway, yeah, there's a barrier. There used to be a barrier. After the Farrell Dam was taken out, those fish would swim as juveniles upstream, and they would hit the BMX Park, and there was a barrier there. That barrier actually is not really much of a barrier at all these days. So kudos to those people who did it. But yeah, fish are making it all the way up into Lazy Creek in the spring and summer months even. Lazy Creek's a really special little stream. We've got other species of fish. I didn't go into it, but there's our native sucker actually spawns in Lazy Creek. So we have the Klamath small scale sucker that spawns here in late April into May. So pretty cool for an urban stream. We actually have quite a decent amount of water in Lazy Creek right now, considering it's the end of the year. And this is Bear Creek with low water. So if I was a fish and I was coming up and I'm smelling my way home, the fancy word is called imprinting. So I've imprinted to where I was born and where I was spawned, and I'm making this huge journey up Bear Creek because this is where I was spawned. Where do you think I might spawn? Where would I find a place to spawn? Am I as good to keep in mind in a few weeks, once the rains come, Bear Creek's going to be quite a bit bigger, and there's going to be a lot more water flowing in it. You think I'd be spawning around this bedrock? No, probably not. Well, we didn't really cover what is spawning. How do we spawn? So, has anybody ever seen salmon spawning? So we're trying to find habitat in our stream, a place where we can essentially dig ourselves a hole where our babies are going to hang out and be protected. And so I'm a salmon, I'm pretty strong. I've migrated 170 miles up the Rogue River to get here. So, Bear Creek is 20 some miles that I have access to, and 100 some miles in the Rogue, and thousands of miles in the ocean, but I'm not that strong. I can't dig in bedrock. So if I'm a salmon, I'm coming down, and we've got some nice gravel over here. This would probably be a good spot where I might consider spawning, but there's a lot of gravel in a river, and there's different parts of a river. And so we have over here, we have this bedrock. It's kind of a riffle. We break riffles into 3 components: a riffle, a pool. So the pool is the slower water in here. That's where babies might hang out. And then it starts to pick up again downstream there. So that's called a tail out. Usually the tail out is like the sweet spot. That's where I want to hang out. That's where water's just fast enough, but not too fast. There's usually good gravel in an area like that. And that's a great place where that flowing water will help me dig gravel. And it also provide flowing water for my babies. So when we're spawning, I don't see any salmon in here right now, but they might be coming in soon. So why don't you be a big male Chinook? And I'll be the lady Chinook. And
So they're gonna dig?
we're gonna
They
dig.
don't have hands, do
No.
they?
How do you
How
think
in
they
the
might
world
dig?
can they dig?
So they dig with this powerful tail. This powerful tail that helped them migrate. And they're using that big powerful tail with the water that's moving down from upstream to downstream. And they're gonna use that force of the water to help them dig their little nest. And their nest is called a red. And so we're sitting here swimming, and you'll see a female salmon. She'll actually turn on her side and keep swimming. Turn on her side. This might take a few days to actually make her gravel nest or red. And so as she's finding the spot where she wants to be, males are gonna start swimming up. There might be 2 males, 3 males. You might have 2, 3 females using the same gravel nest in red, but they'll be here digging their nests, and then eventually she will deposit a little bit of eggs, and the male salmon will fertilize those eggs. Those eggs are gonna fall down into the gravel. So this is kind of what, is that the camera that we want? So this is kind of the process in the middle of it. Here's the female salmon, and she's digging her depression in the gravel here, and these are male salmon back here waiting. But she will actually start, she'll drop her eggs. So there'd be a female in the middle. She'd drop her eggs into the gravel, and then the males are fertilizing the eggs. And those eggs then fall into the cracks and crevices in the gravel, and that's where magic starts happening. So right here, we've got our just a regular old egg, hasn't been fertilized. After fertilization, after a few days, we come to a point where we have an eyed up egg. And so this is when we start having a little baby fish starting. We're not a fish yet. We've just got cells and stuff starting to divide, and we're starting to become a baby fish. So it's gonna take about 3 months, 2.5, 3 months, where these eggs sit now in the gravel and they start developing. So let's go back to here. Mom is still there. She'll guard her red. She'll guard her babies for a little bit longer, but she's starting to get really tired. She's all beat up. You don't see it here, but you'll see salmon as they're spawning. They get so beat up and exhausted from spawning. Their tail, the females, will be all white. All their skin and scales gets ripped off because they've been digging in gravel. Can you imagine digging in gravel for a few days with your hands? You'd be pretty raw and it'd hurt. But she's all beat up in her body. She hasn't been eating, and she's starting to break down. And eventually, she and the males and all the other salmon that are up there are going to die, and they're going to start floating downstream. And it's kind of a sad thing, but at the same time, this is actually probably one of the most beautiful things and parts about salmon is they're now, this thing is this is a circular event. This happens, and it's been happening for thousands and thousands of years. So when she dies and he dies, mom and dad die, their bodies break down, and they actually bring all that beautiful buffet and all that fertilizer that they picked up in the ocean, and that starts now floating downstream. Other animals start eating them. Who eats salmon? Bears. Birds. Yep. Vultures, otters.
Minks.
Pretty much everybody has a role in trying to get some of that energy from the ocean with that salmon. And there's a really cool species. Yes, sir.
Well, as I was driving up here along Bear Creek, I saw maybe 15 vultures,
Mm-hmm.
and they were just hanging out, but they were right next to the creek and those dead trees from the burn. Well, I just thought, well, they were resting, but now it occurred to me maybe they're waiting.
Maybe they're waiting, exactly. Maybe there's something dead down there.
Maybe there's already fish.
you'll-
Or
yeah.
Would there be fish at this point? There'd be no fish.
There's
now.
probably no fish in Bear Creek right now. Bear Creek's still a little bit low, but we could have some fish in here. We do have juvenile fish that are like teenagers, 1 or 2 years old, that are hanging out in Bear Creek right now, as well as another native species, our cutthroats. They might be here, but yeah, the vultures. There's all kinds of things.
I wonder if they know if they actually know the timing of the runs, or if they're, will hang out when there's a run.
I would
waiting.
I would definitely bet that animals know as the seasons are turning, and it is in their best interest to kind of have that adaptation, that they know that food is coming, food is on the way. Under the trees here, and all this vegetation next to the creek is kind of a special place. This is actually called the riparian area. You're going to learn about that in another one of your modules, but the riparian area, all the animals that feed on dead salmon, they're all going to come in through here. Most animals in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest have some part of their adaptations where they're coming into riparian areas, whether it to be just come down here for water, to search for food. But yeah, the animals know, and when the salmon come back, that is definitely one of these marvels of and miracles of life, really, that they help give life to everything else. And so that salmon might get dragged up here, eaten by a bear or an otter. Well, what's that bear or otter going to go do in the vegetation around the creek? What would you do if you had a big old, yeah, exactly. You're going to go, and bears poop in the woods. So bears poop in the woods. They help fertilize all the trees and all the vegetation. And that essentially what that does is brings that energy and nutrients from the ocean that's now in fresh water back to the terrestrial or the land environment. And then it just cycles up from there. So the tree is going to take in those nutrients. It's going to grow big and grow leaves. Those leaves are going to get eaten by little bugs. Those bugs may fall into the water, might feed baby fish in there. There's going to be bugs that are already in the water. Those are macroinvertebrates. They're going to start feeding on that decomposing salmon. It's really, really cool how we're all connected. So
When I was doing a virtual program out here in November, I saw parrot otters that
yeah.
were living here at that time.
Yep.
I was very surprised.
So what if so we've got all of our gravel, and you can kind of see it down here. Let's here's kind of one of the issues with urbanized streams or any stream, really, that you've got all these little cracks and crevices that fish are now hanging out in the gravel. Mom and dad are dead. They are long gone. But these guys are on their own at this point. So they're growing in the gravel. But what if you've got all this kind of like fine sediment and sand and silt? A lot of this stuff can get in between the cracks and crevices of the gravel, actually. And that can actually essentially suffocate the developing eggs. And so that's another reason that we really want to keep water clean and gravel clean, because water can move. You see Bear Creek's a little dirty here. That's actually fine sediment and fine clay and sand that's actually suspended in water that eventually can settle out, and it can actually get in between those gravels and suffocate these guys. Yep.
Wouldn't having just more water in the
It
creek
would,
help
and that also, like as Bear Creek starts coming up in the fall, and we start having the rains, that helps to turn over the gravel and get some of these fine sediments and stuff flushed out. But there are some watersheds in our area, some creeks, that have just so much of these fine sediments that it actually hinders even the adults from digging and finding good, clean gravel. So that's a habitat requirement that salmon and steelhead need. Pretty much any anadromous fish that's going to spawn in gravel, they need that clean gravel. And so keeping point sources of pollution. We sometimes think of pollution as like, batteries or paint or oil or something leaking into a creek. But from a salmon's perspective, pollution can be dirty water and hot water. And so
how fine does the gravel need to be for them to be able to dig?
So for salmon, for salmon, we're looking for a good baseball size to like a softball size.
Oh, that big?
Yep. I mean, this is actually small on the gravel scale for Chinook.
But that's for the babies. What about when they're making the nest?
Yeah, no, that's what they can dig.
They actually
Yep.
move rocks that big
Yep.
with those tails?
Yeah, you'll see Chinook moving almost a cantaloupe size gravel.
Wow.
Yep. Especially if they've got good water helping them. As you get down, like the coho and the steelhead, they'll have smaller gravel requirements, like golf ball size to maybe a baseball size. Suckers and other they use kind of the smaller the fish, the smaller the gravel, essentially, because small fish can't necessarily move big gravel. But suckers will use smaller gravel. Sturgeon, which is another anadromous species found in the Rogue, so a fish that hangs out in freshwater and goes to the saltwater, they won't necessarily dig a red like salmon do, dig their little gravel nest. But this concept's kind of the same. They'll be like this big wall of gravel because they spawn in these really deep, turbulent holes. And so the river comes in and scours out gravel and pushes it up a bank. They'll hang out down in that depression, and when they're spawning, they'll broadcast their eggs out, and they're sticky. So they will get in the cracks and crevices of the gravel, but they'll actually adhere and stick to the gravel and the finer sediments, and that's how they develop. So a lot of different adaptations that fish have to live in different areas. Fish are really cool. That's all I can say.